It is Wednesday, and today I'll be joined by Jim Higdon. Jim Higdon is the co-founder and chief communications officer at Cornbread Hemp, a Kentucky-based cannabis hemp brand. We'll be talking about his backstory, how Cornbread Hemp came to be, and more. Right here on this episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
All right. And real quick, if you like what I do, you can find this podcast on all streaming platforms and at colememo.com. To support the show financially, head on over to colememo.com/support. So that's colememo.com/support, or you can become a patron at colememo.com/Patreon. That's colememo.com/Patreon. For just $3 a month, you can help keep this show going and get early access to the content that I release. Once again, that's colememo.com/Patreon. One of the best ways to support the show, especially if you're watching right now live on YouTube, is by smashing that like button, as the kids say. You can subscribe or give the show a favorable rating from wherever you're tuning in from. It really does help more than you think. And because we are live, if you drop your comments, we can take questions while we have this discussion. If you're catching this later and you're wondering how to join the live streams, I'd say the best way is to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And an easy way to find my YouTube channel is by going to colememo.com/YouTube. And with that said, I'm going to bring my guest on stage. Jim, how is it going?
What's up, Cole? How you doing? Doing great. Hello from Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes, thank you for joining us from Kentucky. And please introduce yourself and tell us where we can find your products online.
Yeah, so I'm Jim Higdon, co-founder of Cornbread Hemp. Got the name of the company from both the book I wrote about the Kentucky cannabis heritage called the Cornbread Mafia, and started the company with my cousin Eric Zipperly in 2019. Kind of made a name for ourselves in the certified organic full spectrum CBD wellness space, and have grown really since then. And now we offer both full spectrum CBD products and also THC gummies and THC seltzers that you're seeing there. And we're based out of Louisville, so we're close to the UPS Worldport here in Louisville, which means we can ship D2C really fast everywhere in the country where our products are legal, and we're happy to do that. And with the beverage launch, we're also getting into the retail space as well.
That is super awesome. That's super awesome. And you kind of you mentioned it, but can you unpack just a little bit more? Could tell that backstory of why your company is named Cornbread Hemp. You mentioned the Cornbread Mafia, and I just think it's such a cool story.
Yeah, so I grew up in a town called Lebanon, Kentucky, in Marion County. And just to date myself, I was in middle school in the late 80s. And in the summer of 89, there was a press conference here in Louisville that announced that 70 men from my community had been arrested on 30 farms in 10 states with what the government said was 200 tons of cannabis, and said that it was the largest domestic marijuana syndicate in American history, and that of these 70 men that they had caught, 0 of them had agreed to testify against each other in exchange for a lesser sentence, which frustrated the federal prosecution. And because it had frustrated the federal prosecution, that's why they were holding this press conference instead of presenting their case in court before a judge and jury. They were presenting their case at a press conference to the public without giving anyone a chance to defend themselves. And in the course of that press conference, the prosecutors referred to this group as the Cornbread Mafia. And that's the line that news editors and headline writers caught a hold of, and that story whipped around the globe on the news wires and became sort of instantaneously a big deal. It brought a lot of notoriety and trauma to our community as news organizations came to get the story of what the government had presented as something, a roundup of 70 people that had happened that day, from the way that the government had presented it, when in fact it had been a series of 30 arrests going back like 5 years. It was presented to the media as if it was some sensational roundup, and that brought a lot of notoriety and infamy to my hometown and caused a lot of trauma in the community and with my parents and the peers of them that were in this small town. Like Lebanon still only has like 2,000 people. It's a small town, and for them to get that kind of notoriety was difficult on economic development and everything else that a small community in Kentucky fights against. And so I went off to school to be a writer, come from a storytelling community, and I knew that there was this story that had never been told because no one would talk about it, and knew that it was a story that needed to be told, because just talking about it to my peers at universities, it was evident that the story was, interesting. Like I went to Brown, and no one at Brown gave a damn about anything that happened in Kentucky. I was the only person from Kentucky that anyone that I knew at Brown had ever met. And they could care less really about where I was from, except when I started telling these stories about Cornbread Mafia stuff, and they're like, hang on, what? And so that really kind of, propelled me and like made me interested in finding a way to tell this story. And I graduated Brown, moved to Brooklyn, was trying to tell this story as fiction, and it just wasn't happening. It wasn't working because my imagination was not as good as what factually went down. But I had no way of understanding how to pull that factual story out of the grave that it was in. And then I went to Columbia Journalism School, and at Columbia, really everything kind of came together, and I learned how to pull narrative from court documents and interviews, and put a book proposal together, and go on a path to get Cornbread Mafia as a book written, and was able to do that. It took a lot of time. I was still in my 20s when I got started, and came out the other side. Book published in 2012, and as a nonfiction book goes, it was very successful here and nationally. That led me into a journalism career. I was covering Kentucky news for the Washington Post when news broke here, and was covering cannabis policy at Politico. And while at Politico, covering the 2018 Farm Bill, found an opportunity to get out of the bleachers and into the game, which as a journalist just is an opportunity that rarely happens. But seeing what the hemp market looked like in 2018, there was no brand that had authenticity and connected itself to the story of where the hemp was being grown. And we knew we had that opportunity with Cornbread because of the Cornbread story. So my cousin Eric, who has an MBA and a marketing background, and I really complement each other's skill set and personality wise, and we just went at it, and got a little bit of an angel investment, like $100,000 in January of 2019, and went to work. Had product online, shipping product by April, shipping USDA certified organic product by December, which got us into the pandemic, and then we just pivoted everything to D2C. And did a fundraise on WeFunder during the pandemic, was able to raise $400,000 on a convertible note. And then we were able to, use that outside, in 21 to begin to grow. We've doubled every year, and now we serve lots of customers across the country. We ship something like 2,500, 3,000 orders a day.
Gotcha. And once again, folks, it's cornbreadhemp.com. Get this stuff delivered straight to your door. And by this stuff, I mean federally legal cannabis. You got to love it.
If you're an adult, we age gate all orders with a service called Blue Check. So if you're under 21, you'll get carded online.
Yeah, be ready. Get your IDs ready, folks.
No, like you don't have you're like adults who have lived in the same address for a period of time will have a seamless checkout process, because Blue Check will identify Cole at this address is this age, ship it. But if Cole is ordering at an Airbnb or at a hotel with an address that's not associated with Cole, then the system would be like, I don't know your name relative to this address. Show me an ID.
Gotcha.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. Well, somebody that's commenting said they just pulled your book, The Cornbread Mafia, off of their bookshelf.
That's what I'm talking about, Rachel.
Yeah. Rachel's somebody super cool. I'll have to connect you with them. They're in the Illinois hemp game. They head up the Illinois Hemp Growers Association. And in fact, they just dropped another comment. They said, I'm headed through Lexington next week on my way to Williamsburg. Would love to stop by to get it signed if you're in town. So, hey.
I think I know y'all on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Just drop into my DMs, come through Louisville. I'll give you our address, and you can swing by.
There you go, Rachel. There you go. Get your Cornbread Mafia book signed. That's awesome. Well, cool. I'm glad we could make that happen.
Real things happen, and we're making it happen.
That's right. Well, again, appreciate your time. And folks, if it helps, we'll have cornbreadhemp.com in the show notes so that you can just click on it and hop on over and purchase your products. And yeah, I mean, you just mentioned one of the things that I wanted to have a discussion about today. You know, people talk about the lack of regulations on hemp. And, you know, obviously, I think most reasonable people think there should be, you know, an age gate. But what do you think if we're going to add regulations on? What should we do? Because there's some wacky ones, and we'll probably talk about some of them that have been introduced in the past. But let's just start with, like, how should we regulate cannabis?
So first of all, let's talk about how we got here, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about why it is that hemp is underregulated at the federal level, unregulated at the federal level, and underregulated generally relative to full strength marijuana. And the hemp industry anticipated the FDA issuing regulations in 2019 after the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill. It was assumed that it would. That's the FDA's job. But the FDA refused to do that. Excuse me. FDA refused and drug its feet for years. Finally, in January of, I was going to say last year, but I think it was January of 23. And anyway, maybe it was January of 24, came out and said, in fact, no, we are not going to issue regulations. We need additional authority from Congress to issue regulations for CBD full spectrum hemp products. So we are here as an unregulated industry because FDA refuses to issue those regulations or claims that it doesn't have the authority. What FDA really wants, FDA wants two things. One, the FDA is a government body that's funded not by appropriations, by taxpayer money, but by user fees from the pharmaceutical companies that utilize its services. So the FDA is paid for by user fees from pharmaceutical companies, and the pharmaceutical companies do not like the disruptions caused by the cannabis industry, writ large, whether it's medical marijuana, adult use, or the hemp industry, because prescriptions are going down as a result of broader cannabis legalization. So there's hemp products, full spectrum CBD products are a threat to prescription medication, and any retailer with a pharmacy is regulated by FDA because that pharmacy is licensed by FDA. And there was a big box retailer in early 2021 that was getting froggy. It was like, we don't care what the FDA says. We're going to move ahead with full spectrum CBD products on shelf. And they were essentially threatened, as I understand it, saying, the FDA would pull the licenses for their pharmacy if they stocked unregulated hemp products. And so they couldn't, because the pharmacy revenue obviously is far more significant than anything that full spectrum CBD would bring them. So we're unregulated because FDA refuses to issue regulations and enforces that refusal to issue regulations by threatening pharmacies with their licenses. So this is why you can't buy CBD products or decent CBD products on Amazon, because Amazon is a pharmacy. And so that's how we got here. And now states are picking up the slack and issuing a variety of regulations. We went through a wave of regulations from, say, 2 years ago on adult use hemp products, including semi-synthetics like Delta 8. And then another wave this year, as hemp beverages have become popular, the beverage stakeholders demanded another round of regulation, which is where we are now. Not because there's been any sort of emergency regarding hemp beverages, but only because hemp beverages have disrupted yet another industry. So we pissed off the pharmaceutical industry, we pissed off the tobacco industry, we pissed off the alcohol industry, and we've kind of split the cannabis industry. There's some folks in the cannabis industry that support what's going on in hemp and have kind of crossed over and straddled the hemp divide, and others in the cannabis industry that see us as a threat and don't understand how to operate on the hemp side. So we've, essentially disrupted and have made enemies of 4 or 5 giant multi-billion dollar industries in America, which is why we're in this situation we are now. We're on the front edge of cannabis legalization. Descheduled cannabis looks a lot like what hemp legalization looks like now, with better regulations, but we're the front edge of what cannabis legalization looks like writ large, direct to consumer, available in liquor stores, outside of dispensaries, and including dispensaries for flowers and concentrates and high potency products, while broadening access to consumers in places like liquor stores, grocery convenience, pharmacy, health and wellness stores. Across the board, there's a role for different levels of cannabis products at different potency levels in all these different retail outlets and in places that have staff that can check IDs to make sure that customers are at least 21. We're at the beginning stages of what cannabis legalization looks like. It's difficult, frustrating to take fire from inside the house from other folks in the cannabis industry. But that's kind of where we are. Like, we didn't ask to be unregulated. We've been asking for regulations. But this is where we're at. We continue to ask for those regulations. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable will be flying into D.C. next month to ask Congress for those regulations as we continue to try to get a farm bill passed. I got 3 years behind schedule now. So really, we're just really looking to the next farm bill. Like, we're just not even going to get a farm bill passed this time around, probably. But if we do, we want to make sure that it's right and address, legislators' concerns about how the marketplace has grown without, going backward. Like, we can't go backward. We have to keep going forward. But what we're at is in this frustrating, uneven nature of cannabis legalization. Like, no one quite knew what cannabis legalization would look like, but this is what cannabis legalization is looking like. And it's uneven and ugly, and it's moving in the right direction, but not how anyone anticipated. No one anticipated that cannabis legalization would come in the form of a can in a liquor store. Like, this came out of nowhere. But I mean, these seltzer products are what people want, and it delivers THC in a socially acceptable way, without the smoke, without the smell, in a way that people can enjoy it socially without it, becoming a problem or causing anyone to give you the stink eye from across the room. And it's done wonders to increase the size of the cannabis using market, because people are willing to try low dose hemp derived THC seltzers because it's a non-threatening way to encounter the product, and it doesn't involve socially taboo aspects like smelly and smoky, stinky cannabis flower, which I enjoy personally, but there's a whole market of folks who do not.
Right. Yeah, it's very familiar, I would say.
Yeah, it's just it's easy. It's so easy, and like rolling into to a social engagement with a cooler of cannabis seltzers, like it's a whole nother thing, and no one anticipated. I certainly never anticipated that that's what cannabis legalization would look like, and we'll get to a point where full strength cannabis flower is legal under federal law, and where we're no longer sending people to prison for it. Cannabis legalization, this process is going to be long and messy. But we're in the midst of it now, and we're winning, and we just need to continue to push the ball forward without letting entropy and like the slow process of legislation and regulation, slow us down. We're all living right now it's Wednesday at 5:22 Eastern time. When I say that to say we're living in a future that's dictated by what's going to happen in Texas, and either it's going to be either the lights are going to go out in Texas and there's going to be a ton of lawsuits and it's going to be an uphill battle left and right because the lights went out in Texas, or Governor Greg Abbott is going to veto SB 3 and prohibition is going to not have held in Texas. And if prohibition won't hold in Texas, where will it hold? And we're got the wind at our back and really talking about what federal cannabis legalization will look like if Greg Abbott of Texas vetoes a THC ban. So like the future, like we're on the cusp of the future, but we don't know what that future is as of 5:23 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, June 18th.
Right. Yeah. And I want to get back to Texas because I think that's going to be all eyes are on Texas. Let's just put it that way. But what are the regulations you think are sensible to start with on these products?
Sure. Well, yeah, sure. So, age gating, third-party
Yep.
lab testing, there's clearly concern with legislators about certain varieties of synthetics that have been used to circumvent the Delta 9 definition in the Farm Bill. I don't think anyone who's in favor of legalizing cannabis is going to go going to fight tooth and nail to the death over some of these novel cannabinoid, synthetic cannabinoids like HHC and et cetera. Like even Delta 8 is a new cannabinoid, generally speaking. So, like these are all, messy attempts at furthering the legalization effort, and there's a demand for it in the marketplace because full-strength cannabis remains illegal, especially in places that are totally dry, like Texas. THCA flower has a real market because there's no opportunity to get quality cannabis flower in Texas or in other states where there's no access to cannabis flower. I mean, Kentucky will have medical dispensaries by the end of this year, and Kentuckians can go to several border states to access cannabis dispensaries, Illinois and Ohio, Missouri and Virginia. West Virginia is not open to Kentucky for business, but like 4 of Kentucky's 7 border states have legal adult use cannabis. So like all that's going to happen, but until it does, you have a marketplace for THCA flower and these novel synthetics. And so it's just a messy aspect of the legalization movement, how we got here.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're advocating for is sort of what I've heard called the 3-pillar approach, which is that age gate, the testing, and the truth in labeling.
Sure. Yes. And like, it's important to have labeling standards at the federal level because the state level labeling standards are killing us. Like there's only so much real estate on these labels.
Yeah.
And warning label from here, warning label from there. One thing that we were successful doing in Kentucky is, let's see if I can find it. We got Kentucky to make it compliant to put warning labels at the QR code that's labeled warning statements. So we're able to accommodate additional warning statements from Kentucky and other states without taking up real estate on the label, and change them over time with the same packaging if needed, by just changing it on the website instead of having to change on the package. But until we get there, that's like what we're talking about in some of these regards, not just in terms of hemp regulation and these pillars that you're talking about, but like, we're talking about regulating hemp. We're just in a holding pattern or a half measure, a half step towards full legalization. Like eventually this is all going to change and we're going to be in a better place. So like the regulations that we need now to hold us over, to protect consumer safety and protect, consumer faith that the cannabis industry can be a legal industry in America. Like those are the rules of the road that we need so that people, legislators, thought leaders in communities understand that consumers and businesses that serve those consumers can do so safely and in a way that doesn't cause social harms. So like those 3 pillars that you talk about are definitely key to establishing that trust with legislators and stakeholders.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like you say, it's like almost, setting aside the arbitrary term of hemp, like this is really the future of cannabis regulation. This really should take hold for all cannabis regulation. So,
And the bill that the farm bill should never have regulated finished products.
Sure.
To get into this piece, like the farm bill is meant to regulate hemp as a commodity in the field, as an ingredient. The finished product regulations statute should come from a separate bill that goes to a separate committee. In the Senate, that would be the HELP committee, and in the House, it's Energy and Commerce. With a bill that we can get through those committees, or at least approved by the ranking and chairs, we can empower the FDA to regulate finished products for legal cannabinoid products that today are hemp products, but that tomorrow could be full strength cannabis products. So we can lay the groundwork now for finished product regulations at the federal level with hemp products that full strength cannabis flower and high dose, cannabis extract products could fall into on the other side of legalization, because the legalization movement, from the beginning, since the 60s, before, has been focused on legalization. But what hemp has shown us is that legalization is only half the battle. Like, if you don't get regulations on the other side of legalization, you're left in this limbo where we are now, and it's not good. Like, we've got to get regulation on top of legalization, and that's the next fight.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, the Farm Bill, like you said, does not regulate end products. It just regulates the cultivation of plants. For example, for folks, the Farm Bill regulates the cultivation of corn and other produce, but it does not regulate the products you might buy from the store, like canned corn.
Right.
Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, it's a perfect. I mean, it regulates corn but not whiskey. It regulates barley but not beer. While hemp products have more uses than just their intoxicating nature, it's important to understand that the Farm Bill was a clever legislative vehicle to get this legalized, but it's not the appropriate vehicle to get us over the finish line. And we need House Energy and Commerce engaged on this in a productive way. So that's really and we have allies in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and we also have adversaries there. It's a different battleground, and we're going to fight that battle sooner or later.
Yeah. So it seems like some people within the, let's call it the marijuana industry, just to use the other arbitrary legal term since we're throwing around these.
Right. So cannabis is a blanket term for both of us. Hemp is defined in Congress as cannabis with a certain THC level, and then everything above that THC level is marijuana.
Right. Marijuana.
Right. As outdated and as racist as a term as that is, that's the world that we live in.
Yeah. And to sort of really put it, this is one of my favorite examples to help people understand. It used to be in these state legal systems that if you asked a participant, how did you acquire your genetics? The popular answer was immaculate conception. Now, because hemp has been determined to include the cannabis seed, these companies can legally and in the light acquire their genetics. What's interesting, just to really paint the picture for people, for most of the life cycle, that product could legally qualify as hemp. It's up until those the last end of the life cycle that it turns into marijuana. Again, folks, we're just throwing around the arbitrary legal terms created at the federal level.
Totally arbitrary. Where does 0.3% come from? No one knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of the blue.
Right. So it seems like, thank you for I think that's a really good foundation. It seems like people within that state legal marijuana industry have been advocating for a 4-pillar approach instead of a 3-pillar approach. And that 4th pillar seems to include limitations on market participation. And I've seen you on social media say that you view those limitations as a form of prohibition. I call it a soft prohibition. Can you tell us more why you see it that way? And I'd be happy to share my perspective as well. But I'm sure you've got a good enough perspective on this.
I mean, prohibition is what it is, and I don't know that there's a softer or a harder version of it. Like in Kentucky, for beverages, we had the right to sell beverages on premise in bars and restaurants, and then that was taken away from us by the legislature. Even though we're still able to sell beverages in Kentucky in packaged liquor stores and D2C, the fact that we had on premise taken away from us is a form of prohibition, and therefore prohibition. There's really no reason to qualify it. And for members in the alcohol industry or members of the cannabis industry to advocate for prohibition for an industry or a product type that it sees as competitive, really speaks to the people in those companies' inability to recognize the irony of fighting for legality for themselves while denying it for others. There's a marketplace, a free market, mostly, relatively speaking, for a reason. And a lot of folks in the marijuana industry are frustrated by the slow-moving nature of federal legality. Everyone thought that federal legality would be moving much faster than it has. They're right to be frustrated, especially in state legal markets where the 280E tax penalty is just eating people alive, causing operators and their workers to really suffer. It's understandable that they're looking for relief from the cage that they're in by necessity, because they can't operate in interstate commerce because it's still illegal under federal law. And so inside that cage and with that frustration, some have decided to lash out at hemp as a perceived competitor to the marijuana programs in those states. I don't see it that way. From our customer data, it doesn't appear that our customer type is a dispensary customer that we're taking away from dispensaries. We do robust business in D2C in many adult legal states, and our customer remains, generally speaking, women over 50 in the suburbs and rural areas that are not served by cannabis dispensaries in rec legal states. We do not have a lot of customer density in Los Angeles or San Francisco, but we do have customers in rural and suburban areas in California, and those, they're customers who are not being served by dispensaries. So there's an opportunity in some of these cases to participate, by supporting the tax base in those states by broadening the customer base and the excess tax base to support the overall cannabis industry, because we're serving customers who are not going to dispensaries.
Yeah. And I guess to reframe my question, like in my home state of Illinois, people will say, well, we're not trying to ban hemp. We're just trying to put it under our cannabis framework. But what they're not saying is that includes license limitations. Like we have a hard license cap versus, states like Michigan or Oklahoma, which kind of allow for open participation. I view that as sort of their fourth pillar, because they do take the 3-pillar approach, the ID, the age gating, the testing, and the labeling. But it seems like their fourth pillar is limitations on allowing anybody and everybody to participate, aka what I thought was the American dream.
Right. I mean, there is always a desire to protect what you've created in the place where you've created. It's a natural impulse. So I don't want to characterize it negatively, but only to say that in America we have a constitution, and in the Constitution there's a Commerce Clause, and the way the Supreme Court understands the Commerce Clause is that a state cannot erect barriers to out-of-state competitors to benefit in-state operators. There's a Supreme Court case from 20 years ago called Granholm versus Held about direct-to-consumer wine sales, where 2 states, Michigan and New York, had allowed intrastate, like direct-to-consumer wine sales inside the state, but had banned direct-to-consumer wine sales from out-of-state into state to protect in-state wineries from out-of-state competitors. And the Supreme Court ruled you can't do that. That like part of the reason why we are the United States of America is that we are united in economic commerce, and to allow states to erect barriers to business from other states would balkanize America and make it difficult to do business across state lines. So for cannabis operators who think that hemp should be forced into their state legal marijuana programs, which are only like half measures to get like product to consumers in market, but is not the end point of what legalization looks like, because that's all just placeholder for what happens when federal legalization comes. And like that's not going to be tomorrow, but it could be the day after tomorrow, and we all just have to be patient for that, because we can't build permanent structures or conceive of what permanent regulatory structures look like under the current framework, because all that's going to change in a matter of time. But state legal marijuana programs, state legal marijuana dispensaries, like in Illinois, are structured in a way to not engage in interstate commerce. Like the purpose of a marijuana dispensary system is to not engage in interstate commerce, and so therefore not violate federal law. But hemp products are legal under federal law and able to engage in interstate commerce. And so by attempting to shove hemp products that are legal under federal law into an illegal state-run dispensary system, states run the risk of running afoul of the Dormant Commerce Clause, and we've seen judges in places like New Jersey say that you can't do that. And so, I would suggest to our friends in the Illinois regulated market, or any state's regulated market, I think Missouri is actually trying to work their way through this, after the fact, after not being able to pass a bill this current session. But the solution here is not to shove a federally legal product into a federally illegal marketplace. That is going to run afoul of the Constitution, and any time spent creating this model is going to get thrown out in court, and it's going to cost a lot on the litigation side. So I would recommend against it.
Yeah. Let's show a video that you recently made that showcases some of those ludicrous regulations that you sort of made mention of earlier, and then maybe we can segue to Texas and federal hemp news to close out the show. So let's watch this clip that you produced, folks. I found this really notable. Let's check this out. So here it is.
Hi, we're in the Canary Club here in downtown Louisville, where folks have been enjoying THC seltzers by the drink at the bar for years now. It's after June 1st, so we're here to see if we can still buy a THC seltzer on premise at a bar or restaurant in Louisville. Hi, can I buy a THC seltzer, please? No. Okay. It's because it's after June 1st and the laws have changed. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk across this hallway into The Breeze. The Breeze is a store with a packaged liquor license. And so they're able to sell THC seltzers because they have a quota packaged liquor license from the state ABC here in Kentucky. So at a packaged liquor store, is it still legal to buy THC seltzers in Kentucky? Let's find out. Hi, can I buy this THC seltzer at this packaged liquor store? Yeah. Great. It's as easy as that. Here at Cornbread Hemp, we're here to tell you that in Kentucky, after June 1st, you can no longer buy THC seltzers at a bar and a restaurant, but you can buy them at a quota packaged liquor store wherever you can buy wine, beer, and spirits. So it's after June 1st. Go buy your THC seltzers at the liquor store, and tell your representatives and your senators that you want to buy them on premise at bars and restaurants again next year. Thanks.
So that really illustrated just how crazy those regs are. The fact you just walk through a door and that was just really good job on that, because I didn't know that this had become the law of the land in Kentucky, and what a way to learn about it. You really illustrated it well.
I'm just glad I'm not wearing the same shirt here as I was wearing there, because it's in the rotation. So Yeah, it's a drag, and like we talked about this a little bit before, like this is clearly a prohibition effort by stakeholders who don't want consumers to access these products. Liquor sales are down, wine sales are down 8%, spirit sales are down 4%, and the stakeholders who are concerned about that revenue loss don't want to see competition in the marketplace. And so that's what we're dealing with. Like we've, like when we started this, we knew it was a David and Goliath story, and we were starting, as a scrappy, startup against well-established full-spectrum hemp companies at the time that were doing, millions and millions of dollars of revenue at a time when we were just starting out. And now we've grown to be, peers of those companies. But it's still a David and Goliath tale, but really it's bigger than Goliath. It's David versus Godzilla, with, these industries that we're up against, and banning us on premise in Kentucky and in Alabama. They tried to ban us on premise in Florida, but failed. Like the on premise ban is a trend. They're trying to do that to us in Ohio now as well. And so it's one we continue to fight, but whoever the stakeholder is behind the on-premise ban has successfully introduced that in multiple state legislative efforts. It's not, we have some competitive interest disalignment with folks like the wine and spirits wholesalers, but they want on-premise sales. So wherever the pressure is coming from to ban the on-premise sales, it's not coming from the distributors. So we'll see in the end, like that stakeholder will poke their head up. We've kind of seen that a little, but it's a drag, and to your point, absurd, and just a denial of a simple right for someone to access a legal product in a legal setting who are over 21, just speaks to the fear that powerful stakeholders have in the disruptive nature of these products.
Yeah, well said. So let's switch to Texas, and then we'll maybe take it to the federal level to close it down. Texas, it's a watershed moment for hemp. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest news. Like whatever happens in Texas is the biggest news in hemp since the 2018 Farm Bill. Like, and the biggest news in cannabis before the 2018 Farm Bill would have been rec cannabis legalization, whenever that was 2013, 2012 with Colorado and Oregon, and then before that, the biggest moment is California introducing medical marijuana in '96. So like it's at that level of seismic significant cannabis history. Whatever goes down in Texas this week is big.
What would a ban mean? Let's play out the two scenarios. Let's start with the worst one.
What a ban means is the lawyers are very happy because there's so many lawsuits. Sure. And Texas state court and federal court work itself up to the Fifth Circuit pretty fast. There's lots of litigation. And a lot of other states looking at the Texas model to see if that's what they want to do too. I believe that there's a dormant commerce clause argument to make against the Texas ban because it's not a total ban. It creates an in-state market of CBD and CBG isolate that it protects against out-of-state commerce. So there's a chance that sort of argument could be seen favorably, but it's a difficult case to make. And so, if the ban stands, but what we've seen in the polling is that the ban only has 20% support in Texas, and inside of the Republican primary electorate, that number only grows to something like 35%, with 48% against. So a plurality, even if it's not a majority of Republican primary voters in Texas, support a veto of SB3. And the governor has clearly seen that polling. We've all seen that polling. And so, I think that really will tell the tale, but we don't know until we know.
Gotcha. And, yeah, I guess we would just be speculating at this point what a veto would mean.
Well, veto would mean like he would almost certainly also then call a special session.
Right. That's kind of what I meant. Yeah.
Right. So like he's not going to veto it and just let this like current status quo that's upset a bunch of people in Texas to stand. But those are regulatory bill. Like it wasn't perfect. It was a good regulatory bill from Chairman Ken King in the Texas committee that regulates these things. State Affairs, I think, whatever committee that was, is Chairman Ken King has a good bill, and that bill was going through the Texas House before Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick came over to the House and Bigfooted him and forced the House to accept his full ban from the Senate. So there's a good bill out there to be passed, and I think that the governor, if he vetoes, will call a special session to bring that bill into focus. I'm a new novice student to Texas politics and special session dynamics, but if there's multiple agenda items on the special session docket, then our interests could get horse traded with the interests of the other items on the docket. And so that could be an interesting, difficult, frustrating dynamic that we have to deal with in the special. But, a special session will be better than what we got now.
Yeah. And to switch gears and start to close out the show, I think I've got the article up. We'll display the headline here. What's your take on some of this stuff that's going on at the federal level? It looks like a congressional committee approved a bill to ban all hemp products. This was published on June 5th, 2025. Just real quick before I pitch it over to you, I've heard that this same proposal has come up in this same committee and didn't go anywhere. How do you see this playing out?
This proposal is authored by Andy Harris of Maryland. He's a member of the House Freedom Caucus and a known enemy of cannabis reform, generally marijuana reform. He is the sole reason why the District of Columbia is not able to implement its adult use ordinance that the DC Metro Council has passed because he won't let it pass in Congress. Anything that generates revenue in the District of Columbia requires congressional approval. So he is blocking adult use legalization in the District of Columbia. So he's already a known enemy of cannabis. And so
the light bulb just went off for me. That's called the Harris Rider. Is that right?
Bingo, same guy.
Gotcha.
In terms of solidarity with the greater cannabis movement, nothing does the hemp industry any better than making an enemy out of Andy Harris, because we've all been there. He did introduce this last year. It got less attention because it came after the Mary Miller Amendment, which is essentially the same thing. So this Andy Harris Amendment is in the appropriations bill, where the Mary Miller Amendment was in the farm bill. So, same language, different vehicle. The farm bill is not an appropriations bill. It's a guidance bill. So the appropriations come out of a separate program. So it was introduced last year and didn't pass. So to your point, it seems more of the same. We, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, will be doing a fly-in next month, and our primary objective is to talk to key stakeholders in Congress to make sure that they understand that the Andy Harris amendment would destroy the hemp industry, that the hemp industry requires THC in the products for them to be effective with consumers. Even non-intoxicating CBD products require a certain amount of THC in order for customers to find the products to be effective. The marketplace has proven this out. Like CBD isolate products are not popular because they don't work as well. And so killing all THC is going to kill the entire hemp industry experiment and roll progress for cannabis legalization back 10 years. So we can't let it happen. And I think that, we'll stop it in the House. There's enough members of the House on the Republican side that understand the importance of hemp, and there's no way this gets any traction in the Senate. So while I don't think of this Andy Harris amendment as great of a threat as no veto in Texas, for instance, it is a serious issue that needs to be addressed, and it's actually an opportunity for us in the hemp industry to use it to communicate again to legislators and stakeholders why this proposal to ban all THC from hemp would destroy the industry. You can't farm it, you can't sell it, consumers don't want it if there's not THC in it, even for non-intoxicating levels. So it's I don't think that this Harris amendment is I'm not losing sleep over it, although it is another thing to do.
Yeah. Another quick question. Well, maybe, hopefully, I don't know. I'm good on time, but the only other question I can think for you, and I meant to ask it earlier, and this is my burning question that I love to ask people for their take on. Well, first of all, I saw you in Benzinga in Chicago last week, and you were on stage with some people in the licensed marijuana space and people in the hemp space, and that was really cool to see. It's interesting how the attitudes have changed, and it seems like a lot of people in the licensed marijuana space are sort of banking on or invested in the idea of rescheduling, which was started under a process that was kicked off under our former president, and still has yet to come to fruition. My question is, with all the complaints that these licensed marijuana people have, 280E, you mentioned that earlier, the inability to accept credit cards, trouble banking, you can get copyrights with a hemp brand and stuff. My question is, it seems like hemp is sort of our foot in the door for a descheduled cannabis world. And my question is, from your perspective, why don't we see, we've seen some of these bigger companies hop in and it's welcome to the party.
Right.
Isn't it great? But I guess my question is, why aren't we seeing more? Again, our foot's in the door. Let's open it the rest of the way. What's your take on that?
It's frustrating. A couple of things. One, that foot in the door is only good for certain products, right? A lot of people in the cannabis space, marijuana space, are really invested in growing, cultivating, and bringing to consumers extraordinary cannabis flower, and you still can't do that under hemp. Edibles, gummies you can do, beverages of course you can do, and we've seen all sorts of operators in the edibles and beverage space, move over from. In the panel discussion at Benzinga, Kiva Confections was on that panel, and they make all the best gummies in the dispensaries, and now they're making the same sort of products using hemp on the other side. And the other group on the stage with us on the cannabis side was Glass House, which is maybe the largest cultivator of cannabis on earth, certainly one of the biggest in America, and I believe they're growing hemp THCA flower for export out of California. You can't sell it in California, but in markets where it's legal, you can. And so that they've seen the writing on that wall, and we're all for supporting cannabis companies, diversifying their holdings and getting getting into this market, the foot in the door, the camel nose under the tent. Pick your colorful metaphor for what it looks like when we get a little bit in there to open this up, because this is where this is going. The challenge with some folks in the cannabis industry is that they are so deeply invested in the state legal system, even though the state legal system is meant to only be a placeholder until we get to federal legalization, because they are so invested in the cage that they are in. They want to bring everyone down to that level. And so like that's that's the fight that we have, that like in you see that on the X platform a lot. Like people are just invested in the cage. I'm reminded of the story of Plato's Cave, where the protagonist of Plato's Cave breaks out of the cave and realizes that everything that they understand to be reality is just shadows on the wall, and then there's a real reality outside of the cave. And he comes back into the cave to rescue the other people trapped in the cave. And when he tells them that the reality isn't the real reality, that there's a greater reality outside of it, the thanks he gets is that the other people kill him because they refuse to believe the new reality that he's offering them. And kind of feel that in this hemp versus marijuana cannabis family feud that sometimes arises. Folks in the marijuana market just don't want to see what the options and possibilities are in interstate commerce on the hemp side. They just want to see hemp as bad because they're frustrated and their emotions are high because of what they've invested in their business on the marijuana side. And it's difficult to reason with folks who are in their feelings like that.
But do you think the tide is turning? Like we are starting to see, I'm not going to give anybody any more free advertising, but you mentioned Glass House, so we'll give them, the airtime. That's a pretty well-known brand. There are other big brands too that I can think of, huge brands in the marijuana space that have really started to lean into hemp with their own brands. Some of them are even opening up their own hemp dispensaries, those two big brands I'm referencing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make you feel like the tide is turning?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, the last thing we want is an enemy out of, a giant MSO like Curaleaf. Like I'm not wild about Curaleaf, but also like Curaleaf is doing the right thing. Like they're straddling the market and taking advantage of both sides of it and working to make it all legal. I had this conversation on the sidelines of Benzinga that major beer companies are interested in getting into the beverage space. And how do I feel about that? And the way I feel about it is, look, there's plenty of customers for everybody. Like what we need is a bunch of industry stakeholders rowing in the same direction. Like, let's all get together and push. Like we've got work to do. And the more stakeholders we have seeing the benefit and the value of it, the quicker we'll get to the end destination. And, it's not great that we require the help of large entrenched corporations that have, been our adversaries in the past. But we should welcome them into the tent when they come around because we need their help to get where we're going.
And that is what I think is very notable about, if you want to call this hemp thing a movement. You've been saying the word straddling, and what I imagine is there's like a fence. Let's call it the cannabis fence. And on one side it's marijuana, and on the other side it's hemp. And what I see when some of these marijuana people come to the other side of the fence, the hemp people say, "Welcome, let's have a party. Let's fight for the customers. Bring it." But it seems like on the other side of the fence, they're like, "No, you're not allowed on this side of the fence." So
we're, I don't. I just bit my tongue. Once you get a taste of interstate commerce and what freedom looks like on this side of the world, like why would you want to go back into the cage? Like we want people to come out of the cage and see what it's like to engage in interstate commerce and why we all need to get there as quickly as possible. There is no reason for a hemp company to want to be in a system that is illegal under federal law and trapped in a state without the ability to cross the state line. That's the past, not the future.
Well said, Jim. I have had a really good time with you today. We should do this again in the future. And you're close by, you're relatively close to Illinois,
Yeah.
so maybe
it's like a 45-minute flight, man. Like Chicago Midway on Southwest. You fly up, you go right back down. It's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Love Chicago, especially in the summertime. Would love to get together with you and do this in person. It's been a pleasure for me as well.
Yeah, we'll have to knock back some Cornbread THC seltzers, which again, folks, you can get at cornbreadhemp.com. They've got so much more than the seltzers, though. I'm displaying it on screen right now. You can see they've got gummies, drinks, oils, creams, balms. They've even got stuff for your CBD for your pets. So
we got one pet SKU. Like, we need a broader pet offering, but that pet oil is super popular. Like we've been talking a lot about the beverages, but just a real quick shout out to our lab team and these gummies. It's not just that we're making high quality, full spectrum USDA organic gummies made from organic hemp. But like when you make it with organic products, it's not just like a substitution of conventional ingredients for organic ones. Like that creates a chemical difference and an actual perceptible difference in like the mouthfeel and the taste of these products. And the gummies are something else. So if you're an edibles person, you need to check out cornbread gummies because we make them better than anybody else.
Heck yeah. And it looks like when you go there, folks, you can see there's a 25% off, at least as of today, 6/18/25. There's a 25% off your order. So, take advantage of that. And Jim, again, it's been a pleasure. Would you like to say anything else before we go or call it a wrap?
No, man, I really appreciate it. I'm not going to talk shit about Chicago sports teams because I like you. And I'm looking forward to enjoying your company in the future.
Absolutely. Me too. Well, folks, I hope you found as much value in this conversation as I did. Once again, support a farmer that's down to earth by going to cornbreadhemp.com. We'll see you on the next episode, everybody. You take care.
Thanks, Cole.